Welcome to our show. This is going to be terrible. We're three friends hanging out, talking about whatever seems interesting at the time. If we haven't met before, hi, my name is Robert.
And I am James.
I'm Nathan.
Now, you may have been wondering where we've been the last couple weeks. Well, see, we missed our release of our last episode, creating a variant timeline. TVA showed up, pruned us, and we've been fighting our way back from the void ever since. No, that's not true. We were just really tired. Recording an episode every other week, editing, and all the other good stuff that comes with it can be tiresome, and we were feeling a little bit of burnout. So the break was needed. But we're back. And if the ruse of being pruned didn't tip you off to us talking about Loki, today's main topic will be Loki. We'll also share a couple other different things we found interesting throughout the last couple weeks. Loki aired on Disney Plus over the last 6 weeks, with his finale airing last week, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
And so
time is all relevant based upon when you're hearing this anyway.
True.
Or time traveling.
And time is a loop.
Dimension hopping?
I don't know. Maybe we should ask He Who Remains. But what does remain is us talking about Loki. So tell me, gentlemen, what'd you think?
I mean, it was fun. It was a fun ride. It got to see some new stuff to help expand the multiverse in this case, not just the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There was a couple points that just kind of seemed to be slow for me and didn't seem like they really connected well. Like the whole scene where they're on that like barge going to where they can get off the planet that's about to be exploded. I think it was episode 3 or 4 when that happens. And then Loki's like kind of goofing around and just being an all-around clown. And that seemed very out of character. And it's like, why is he doing it? I mean, other than for the sake of plot, it's like, why would he do this? So there were a couple of clunks kind of sprinkled throughout all the episodes. But for the most part, I thought it was a really good tie-in to this next phase of all the cinemas that are coming out now, which I know is going to be spearheaded mostly by the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. So I thought it was just a kind of good way to help explain.
As to your why he would do something like that, Nathan, do you not recall that he is the god of mischief? In Thor Ragnarok, when he is impersonating Odin, he puts on a whole, faux, here's what really happened in Asgard and stuff play.
Yeah, but he wasn't in like
the type of thing that a Loki would do.
But he wasn't in mortal peril in that part of the movie.
I guess this also speaks to the line where he says like he's hedonistic. I think I get where you're coming from in terms of how it plays out. They're stuck on Lamentis. Mm-hmm. They're trying to get off this planet because it is an apocalyptic event. So if they don't, they die. So I get where you're like, they should be rushing to get off of this planet. The ship is supposed to apparently not make it off world, which is why it's an apocalyptic event, because everybody dies. So you would think that the priority would be to get to that ship as fast as possible. You could argue they're on the train. The train is only moving at a certain speed. It is the two of them versus a train full of guards. So I guess they kind of just have to sit and wait for the train to reach the station. So I don't necessarily think it's out of character for Loki to behave the way that he did, given the circumstance that they're basically just waiting. So he's going to get drunk and have a good time or whatever. But it did feel like a bit of a, slow roll there for a minute, where it kind of brought things down too slow for, we got to get off this world right now. I agree with Nathan. The show for me, for the most part, works fantastic. I love almost everything about this show. The visuals are fantastic. Even I love the aesthetic of the TVA. I love the visuals for the show are fantastic. I love all of the characters, all have their purpose. I didn't feel like anyone was kind of a waste. I think everybody kind of played their part, even down to some characters like Hunter B-15, that are kind of these more side characters, even play their own part and, get their own moment to shine. So I love how character focused the show was. I love how deep it dives into what makes a Loki, our particular Loki, the main Loki variant anyway, because we meet him before all the stuff in Infinity War and Endgame. So he's still the smug, just beaten by the Avengers, evil Loki that we know or knew, and seeing him still reach the same point that our actual Loki in Endgame reaches, seeing that development play out in a different way was really neat for me. Seeing all the different variant Lokis, I thought was a really cool twist on like multiversal type stuff. A lot of it was also played for laughs, which were all great. When they're all sitting in the void and they're talking about what were their Nexus events that made them all variants, and the Loki Gator ate the wrong neighbor's cat or something. Little moments like that were just funny. But James, let's hear your overall thoughts on the show, and I kind of want to see if we can't pick certain moments of the show that stood out to us.
Well, first off, I'm going to have to back you up here a second because you mentioned everybody having their own purpose, and I need to correct you. Everybody has their own glorious purpose. Glorious purpose.
True.
If you're going to talk about a Loki show, it's got to be about that. But yeah, I really enjoyed the show quite a bit. It was different than I thought it was going to be, in the sense that I thought it was going to be more like not necessarily a quantum leaping type thing, but I thought it was going to be more focused on the time travel aspect of like, okay, in this episode, we're going to go to the medieval era. We're going to go to ancient Egypt, etc., and so on, visiting a ton of different locales, when in reality, in the 6 episodes, they maybe only go to about half a dozen time periods, if that. A lot of it is focused on the TVA, which, thinking back, that would make sense when before the show came out, there were some people that described it as having kind of like, an office comedy, not really comedy, but type feel of a show. And that's really on display with what they do with the TVA and all of its little working bits. From having Loki go to look up a bunch of whole records thing, and having a bunch of librarian type people shushing him. I don't know, all that little stuff, all the little micromanaging that you would expect. I'm assuming in an office. I don't work in an office, so I'll have to take one of y'all's words at that, maybe.
Yes, that's exactly what it's like.
I'll just continue to work in a hot, stuffy warehouse.
You're right, though, because going into the show, I didn't know really what to expect. I was expecting there to be more like time travel and, like James said, going to different locales and different time periods. And there really wasn't a whole lot of that. So I think it was at the end of the 3rd episode when it finally hit me. It's like, okay, this show is not what I was expecting at all. And I really just kind of got to sit back and enjoy the ride, because like, there's no way I can predict what's going to happen. There's no way I can guess, because I'm just not that smart. There's no way I could have written anything like this. And I'm just, let's do this right.
Yeah, I think the show kind of like makes us think it was, I mean, there was the stuff that came out beforehand that made us think that it was going to be kind of this time hopping adventure. The show also kind of starts off that way, right? When they're kind of going through Loki's tape, they talk about the whole DB Cooper incident. There's a moment where they do go to like this Renaissance fair in a certain point in time, and they go to Pompeii when Loki is trying to prove his whole apocalypse theory. So there were a couple moments there in the first 2 episodes where they do jump around a little bit and make it feel like, okay, we're going to be on this Doctor Who-ish time hopping adventure, but then they quickly divert from that the moment you meet Sylvie. It's not about jumping through time anymore. Now it's about figuring out what is Sylvie's end game. What is she getting at? And then where does Loki play a part in that? Because apparently they form some connection really quickly. Not apparently, they form some connection really quickly. I think that this is the downfall of making these shows so short, is that you miss out on a lot of those opportunities to do that kind of thing. Like, I think Loki could have been what it was while still adding some more time hopping adventure type stuff if we had, let's say, maybe 2 more episodes in it. If we got an 8-episode run like WandaVision, right? Instead, we got 6 episodes like Falcon and Winter Soldier, And I just don't know that 6 is enough to be able to add some more of the fun elements. That doesn't necessarily make the show bad. I still think it was fantastic. Like Nathan said, at a certain point, you just gotta be like, all right, let me lower my expectations, not expectations, but kind of let me throw my expectations away and then just live in the moment with this show and see where it's taking us. And it does go to some really cool, ideas and really neat places. So was there a standout?
Extra episodes wouldn't necessarily have fixed this quote unquote problem, because WandaVision may have had a few extra episodes, but it also compensated for that with a decreased runtime per episode. I don't have the numbers offhand, but I'm sure if you added up the entire runtime of WandaVision's 8 episodes and the runtime of Loki's 6, along with, the 6 for Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think Marvel is aiming for this, same 5 to 6-ish hour runtime for these, premiere streaming shows for the Marvel stuff.
That's
realistically, if they had wanted to, again, you did mention in the first, couple episodes, I guess probably more in the second, when they actually, had Loki doing some of the hopping around to like the apocalypses and medieval time fair, not medieval, anyway. They did do some of that, but then, like you said, they abandoned it so they could focus more on the Loki and Sylvie and then eventually all the other Lokis and the stuff going on, trying to get to the root of the rot of the TVA.
Yeah. I agree with you there. Was there any particular moment in the show that was your favorite? Like this was one of your either the funniest or just most wow moments for you?
For me, definitely when the Gator Loki bites off the hand of the President Loki. I knew he was gonna bite him, but just to take the hand clean off, I had to pause. I was laughing so much. I could not calm down for 5 minutes straight because I was like, this is exactly what I wanted. And I didn't even know I needed it until I saw it.
Yeah, he does actually even keep screaming as the fight breaks out. If you listen, he is still screaming in the background. Mine will also have to be Loki Gator in that episode, not when he's introduced, because he's introduced at the very end of that cut, the very end of the, what do you call that, teaser at the end of the episode of the end of episode 4,
the post credit scene of episode 4,
post-credit scene,
aka the whole, they actually I don't know about the two of you, but they had me there for a brief minute of like, are we just going to focus on Sylvie from now on, because we just had Mobius was pruned and our Loki, or whatever we're going to call this version of Loki, the Hiddleston Loki, has been pruned. It's like, this would be an interesting way for them to go with the remaining of the series. Have it just be on Sylvie. But nope, we got the only post-credit scene for the series. Like, we didn't even get a post-credit scene at the end of, episode 6. All we got was hey, we're coming back for season 2. But I don't know about either of you, but they actually had me there for a good 30 seconds to a minute before we got that little scene.
Yeah, so we get the intro of Loki Gator, but then in the following episode, when throughout all the events that are happening in episode 5, what was just getting me every single time and just had me cracking up is every time they cut to Loki Gator. Like, it wasn't like, oh, here's just a gimmick, we're just going to introduce, there's a Loki Gator variant, but it was like they cut to him every so often, and like he always had a look on his face like he was present in the moment, engaged with the rest of the Lokis. Like, he didn't have any lines except for the growling at classic Loki when he tells him he ate the wrong neighbor's cat or whatever for his Nexus event. But I love how purposeful but also silly it felt to continue to cut to Loki Gator. Just had me dying every single time. It's like Nathan like dying for him biting the President Loki variant, his hand off, but it just kept doing it over and over and over again. So every time he popped up on screen, I'm just like, why do they keep doing this? This is fantastic. What about you, James? Standout moment?
Well, first off, I gotta give the marketing team credit for the fake out with President Loki, having him be, super obvious in the trailers, and the fact that he is also played by Hiddleston made everybody assume that the Loki that we're going to be following is going to be, doing some sort of weird President Loki type thing like in the comics. But nope, he is just another variant. So I gotta give marketing or whomever credit for, that kind of a fake out. And to Nathan's point of alligator eating the hand, it sort of makes sense they're owned by Papa Disney. Who has an alligator that eats their hand? A Captain Hook. So I doubt that we're going to see a ton of these variants again, but hey, who knows? Maybe President Loki will turn into Hook Loki or Captain Loki. Captain Loki. That sort of has a ring to it. But as when we were discussing this episode as it aired in a text thread between the three of us, at least Robert kept going on about the alligator Loki being the best part. And as I mentioned in the text thread, I disagreed. I much preferred the ending fight against what was the monster's name?
Eliath.
Eliath, yes. And we had Richard E. Grant there dressed up as classic Loki, looking straight out of the old comic books. This garish green and yellow leathery outfits thing. And he's there just, pulling a ton of illusions out of his butt, manifesting an entire illusion of Asgard. And you have the Loki musical theme going on in the background, but they do the whole like, let's present a choir to it and have it sound more epic. And it, for me, worked. And the fact that, this classic Loki dies, screaming about glorious purpose. Just kind of, adds to all of it and shows that all of these Lokis have a lot of power behind them when they, when they either practice or just let it all out. So who knows what we could see from our, what should we call our Loki? It's not Prime Loki, because Prime Loki is probably the one that died to Thanos. I don't know, the TVA Loki, I guess. If he just, let everything out, maybe he could do something along those lines eventually. Maybe in a season 2.
I did rewatch
the other thing that stood out also was I appreciated that the finale was not the stereotypical, like, big battle with a bunch of like special effects of, I almost was about to say, not, like we have WandaVision where its finale was just like a lot of the earlier movies where it's like, all right, hero X versus villain Y, they have, similar power sets, fight, like magic v magic, or, machine versus machine. We kind of get this in the fact that Loki and Sylvie have a duel, but it's not really the same. Like, yeah, they've got the same power sets because they're the same person and all, but that was more of like, I guess, a personal thing personally to me. But I enjoyed that most of the episode, it's sort of an info dump, but it was an entertaining info dump from Jonathan Majors, giving us our first hint at an eventual, Kang the Conqueror, as we're going to see him in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania coming out, I think next year or the year after. I forget, the timeline movie stuff all screwed up. But I really enjoyed his version of in the show, he's He Who Remains, but he's really just kind of a mashup of, I think in the comics, this version of Kang, because there's a bunch of versions of Kang in the comics as well. This one is Immortus, who, just like in the show, he's the last one remaining. He's the oldest one. He is the wisest one because he has seen it all. And yeah, I thought they did a really good job with that, giving us a different kind of a finale. The only knock against it being that we know it's going into a season 2 because they told us that. So things were left up in the air, maybe more than, they probably could have capped off a couple of different things.
So let's talk about the finale then a little bit more in depth. I agree with James. I do like that the finale isn't your typical Marvel style finale. I do also agree that Jonathan Majors did an amazing job playing this variant of King the Conqueror. I love how like just kind of whimsical and kind of crazy his character came off as. It's kind of like, yeah, this probably would be as crazy as you would get being stuck at the end of time by yourself, knowing how everything goes, and just kind of being he who remains, right? Like there's nobody left, you're kind of alone, and all you've got is a virtual clock to keep you company, and a couple of lizard robots. It would probably go a little bit crazy myself too. So I love the way he played this character. I love how you get the sense of like, I agree with Loki where he gets sent back to the TVA and he finds Mobius and B-15, and he's kind of like, there's this new threat. He's both incredible but also terrifying at the same time. You really got that sense from his performance that this is going to be a villain that is probably going to be very unlike any other villain that we've seen, where you're going to kind of be awestruck by this guy, but also absolutely terrified of him and what he could do potentially. I like the finale. If only it was maybe just a little, I could imagine some of the more casual fans maybe getting a little lost in what is going on. Obviously, if you pay attention to a lot of the details of what's going on in Loki with some of the time variant stuff and timeline things, time is always a very confusing thing to deal with. Just ask Chris. But it can be a difficult thing to wrap your head around, and I think Loki takes that in new directions here. So for casual fans, I'm a little worried that they may be a little confused about what exactly is happening and what's going on now that timelines are branching all over the place. I know myself too, I'm asking questions of what does this all mean and not really understanding where this could go. But that just takes me back to what Nathan was saying earlier about kind of just dumping my expectations and then just going along for the ride. And I think that's where the finale left me, was less confused and more excited about the endless possibilities we could go from here. Your thoughts on the finale, Nathan?
The thing that I keep coming back to whenever I think about the finale is outside of the place where they're at with the He Who Remains, you can see like the timeline in the circle around it, and I thought that was a really cool concept to kind of like hammer home how cyclic that time can be and whatever. But it made me think as I'm watching this episode. It kept distracting me because I kept looking at it. It's like you have this sacred timeline, which may or may not be one timeline, because I mean, how many deviations how many standard deviations you have to get away from the timeline before you get a black Loki, before you get a female Loki, before you get an alligator Loki. It's like, so it's, to me, it made me question, what is the definition of the sacred timeline? And I think what it is that He Who Remains was more worried about not necessarily a sacred timeline, but just making sure the evil version of himself never comes to fruition, that any timeline that would spawn an evil version of himself is the one that gets pruned. And no matter where it happens in history, that's where it's got to get, clipped out. And so it made me think about how what I kept seeing as the sacred timeline being the one timeline that we've seen through all these movies, the 22 movies in phase 1 or phase 1 through 3, whatever, how many it was. And just thinking that that's just one story. That is literally just one story out of an infinite number, because that's how infinity works,
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of left me awestruck that even though the battle between Sylvie and Loki wasn't portrayed as this huge clash, the consequences were still humongous, And
Mm-hmm.
it left me in awestruck of that. Just thinking about that, looking at this timeline in the background of all these shots, and I got all that from it. Thinking about all that, I was just like, whoa,
Yeah.
just chills.
I think one of the interesting things
it
about
is interesting that when Sylvie, goes for the killing blow, and we see in the background the timeline start to splinter, it to me sort of looked like veins forming. It had this, it was sort of almost like it was becoming more, biological, organic. I don't know.
Mhm.
It just looked like, oh, hey, it's like a lot of blood forming there and stuff. It was really interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about time, thinking about how time is represented, and the time, thinking more specifically about sacred time, like Nathan was saying, is that yeah, the what we have experienced in the movies has to be just one of multiple timelines. I don't know that the sacred timeline is just one particular thing and how it always happens the same way, because you have to keep in mind that, for example, there is a timeline where Loki is a gator, and he didn't become a variant until he ate the wrong neighbor's cat, right? So there is a timeline where a Loki gator still exists who ate the right neighbor's cat and continued to exist and experience his own story. And the most interesting visual explanation that I have heard to date about how the sacred timeline in Loki works is that you have to think about it kind of like a braided rope, right? All of these strands are braided together to create one rope, tightly wound, very strong, very structured. You can pull on it, it doesn't break. But the moment each individual strand starts breaking, that rope becomes weaker and weaker and more frayed until it loses its ability to hold tension and then eventually snaps. And so I think that's kind of like how, especially time being in a loop, the way it's represented there at the very end kind of fits that visual very well, because yeah, He Who Remains is going around using the TVA trying to cap off all of these little frays in the rope that is the sacred timeline. So yeah, there are all of these different infinite stories that can still coexist, provided that they don't result in an evil Kang that it's going to dominate the entire universe or whatever, or the multiverse in this case. So it's really cool. I wanted to share that visual, the braided rope, I thought was really cool for explaining how there can be a sacred timeline, but that doesn't mean that it is just one story that plays out the same way every time. And I thought that was pretty cool. So anything else we want to share about Loki before we move on to some other areas of interest?
I just got to point out, I saw this online about how the finales of WandaVision and Loki both sync up to where in Loki, when He Who Remains says that he doesn't know what's going on after this point, it syncs up with the point in WandaVision where, what is it? Where
she becomes
Agatha,
the Scarlet Witch.
The Scarlet Witch.
She eventually she just basically becomes the Scarlet Witch. She embraces her full power.
Right. And then again, like there's a big like boom in Loki, and that's when Agatha lands on the ground and like hits everything. And it's like we can probably provide a link in the description where you can see, like, if you play them both at the same time, kind of like Wizard of Oz and that one album, Pink Floyd album, I forget which one it is, but like those things happen at the exact same time.
Just crossed the threshold.
Oh God, you don't know what you've done.
And it's like, what great forethought, months ago WandaVision was done and over with, the start of this year, and yet they're still thinking about these little tiny details to have it all sync up, and it's just so cool.
I don't know, unless or until we get confirmation from people behind the scenes, that might just be people, looking at the art and interpreting it in their own way.
That's fair. And I get what you're saying. I agree with you, except for the fact that it's two like instances where it happens back to back. If it was just one, okay, yeah, that probably is just coincidence. But you're right. I would prefer it if there was verification.
I'm kind of like in the middle here between Nathan and James. I looked at this too, not extensively, but a little more than just cursory, and they do line up very well. And from a storytelling perspective, it is super cool. The amount of coordination and planning it takes for shows that are filmed at different times, edited at different times, seems like almost a little too much for this to be just pure coincidence. Like, how is it they line up so well? But that being said, like on kind of on James's side of things, like there are formulas for how entertainment, movies, and TV shows are made in Hollywood. And for example, you can almost count on in every single movie some kind of cataclysmic or some kind of event that kind of drives the plot forward always happens around the 15-minute mark in movies. And then the resolution or the peak moment that addresses that concern, or where the movie kind of just starts to end. You have that, what would you call, like it kind of rises, you hit the, what is it, the crest,
Climax.
and then start the climax and starts coming back down.
That's
always happens around the same mark. Now, these can be within a few minutes, or like in this case in Loki and in WandaVision, within a couple of seconds of each other, like literally 1 to 2 seconds apart. You could almost fit that into that formula. But the fact that these are two thematically the exact same thing, that Wanda becoming the Scarlet Witch is such a huge moment in the MCU, and then the moment where He Who Remains, who's supposed to know everything about how everything happens, no longer knows how everything happens, and the timeline starts to fracture. And we know that Wanda plays a huge role in multiverse of madness, and the word is right there in the title, multiverse. And we have the timeline splitting, and we have Kang, or He Who Remains, talking about there being multiple universes stacked on top of each other. Is too much to just call it just a coincidence that they just happen to line up that way. But like they both said, until Kevin Feige says, yeah, that was intentional, we won't know 110% for sure. But it is still really neat to think about.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to like two theoretical instances of this. It sort of just falls into the, like, you know, confirmation bias. Like, you're going to see what you want to see. Yet I'm sure if you go throughout the rest of it, there will be plenty of things that don't sync up. So yes, unless we hear it from Feige or the showrunners, you know, maybe the showrunner on WandaVision and Loki had a conversation among each other and said, "Hey, let's do this." I'm just gonna choose to go like some neat coincidence, maybe, but I'm not saying the truth isn't out there, but probably not.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, so we ready to wrap up Loki and move on to some other interesting topics? Yeah, cool. So now with our main topic out of the way, we'll move on to some other areas of interest, things that we saw over the last couple weeks or months since our last episode that we found interesting and want to share. So we'll start with Nathan.
Okay. First thing I saw was just a picture. I think it was a Twitter thread, possibly. People talking about the dynamic between Han Solo and Chewbacca, especially in A New Hope, and just how it's apparently Lucas at some point said that it's supposed to be like a sci-fi version of a man and his dog. And of course you think, okay, Han Solo's the man and Chewbacca's the dog. It makes perfect sense. Chewbacca's hairy and Han Solo is not as hairy. But some people brought up Arthur Chu in this particular thread about how it's backwards, because like Han Solo is the one who's just kind of running around getting into trouble and putting his nose where it doesn't belong. And it's really Chewie who's kind of like bringing him back and like, nope, I got to push the leash on you. And I just love how somebody pointed out, well, that makes sense why Obi-Wan talked to Chewbacca in the cantina at first, because Chewbacca is the one running the show, and he just happens to have this human running around with him. And I just thought it was a really clever twist and interpretation of that dynamic.
Yeah, I like how thinking about that kind of reframes, you know, all their scenes together throughout, specifically the OT, you know, and just thinking about, for example, I imagine I'm visualizing in my head the scene in Empire Strikes Back where they are fixing the ship. They're trying to get it ready to leave. Empire's starting to invade, all that kind of stuff. And Han does the whole, no, not here, there. You know, like when he's trying to pull out to him. And I just picturing that in my head and thinking of Han as like a Jack Russell Terrier, kind of like, no, not this one, not this one, here. And then Chewbacca just being there like, man, just shut up and let me fix the ship. And you just go over there and bother somebody else. I'm trying to do a job here.
I mean, I guess maybe whatever, but all I can think of really when, somebody's talking about, dogs and George Lucas is Indiana Jones and, Henry Sr. being, we named the dog Indiana. So that's all I think of is Lucas and dogs.
All right, James, what do you have?
So this past week or so, again, depending on when you listen to this, time is relative. Right now, we're all gearing up for the release of The Suicide Squad, James Gunn's not a sequel to other Suicide Squad. I'll probably still go back and rewatch other Suicide Squad since, there's some characters that appear in this new one. Rewatch it, I mean, because I've seen it before. But we've had some clips come out, and there was one that was pretty fun this week. And like with all of these random little news bits, we'll probably include links in the descriptions and show notes and whatnot. But this clip highlighted the character TDK, played by Nathan Fillion, which we've now confirmed his TDK stands for the Detachable Kid. And the clip's only maybe 45 seconds, a minute long. And it's worth watching just to see Nathan Fillion and, his arms come off and levitate and go and hit a bunch of army guys or whatever. But meanwhile, every time it focuses away from the arms and it's just on Fillion, you just see him with this, maybe not quite a smug look on his face, but he's just got this, he's mugging for the camera and just shaking back and forth. Obviously, phantom limbing his limbs out there, and it's just really weird. And meanwhile, you've got Harley Quinn and Rick Flag. They're the TDK is providing cover for them, and they're both just like, what is this? Who got this guy for the team? What is going on here? And it's an entertaining clip. I look forward to, again, time being relative, Suicide Squad. The Suicide Squad is in 2 weeks' time, and I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point.
Yeah, I found the clip pretty hilarious. When I heard that TDK was going to be in this movie, I wondered how they were going to portray that. I don't know a whole lot about TDK from the comics. I just heard in the description that his limbs are detachable. And so I don't know, for whatever reason, I had pictured in my head that he just kind of detaches a limb and throws it at you or beats you with his arm, just rips off his arm and just is beating you with it by holding with his other arm. And I'm thinking how practical of a superpower is that, or is it just played for laughs? And so when in the clip, and you got to watch it, we'll drop the link in the description or the show notes, like James said, but you got to watch it because his arms just kind of pop off, and then, like he said, levitates, and he's basically phantom limbing the actions. And it was just so what? That you're reacting exactly like Rick Flag and Harley Quinn are, where you're just like, what the freak is going on right now? It was so bonkers and not what I expected, that it was fantastic. But also, for some reason, just weirdly on the nose for something Nathan Fillion would play as a character. I don't know why. I just this makes sense that they picked this guy for this role. So I am excited to see whatever crazy wackiness we're going to get, not just from TDK because he's being played by Nathan Fillion, but the rest of the cast. I think it's going to be a great, great movie and an improvement over the last Suicide Squad.
And thinking about it again real quick, not cutting you off, Nathan, but it's a perfect role for Fillion because, again, this is the Suicide Squad. We know at least probably a quarter, if not half, of the people who were listed in the cast as being on the squad are probably going to die very quickly. I don't see TDK, Nathan Fillion, lasting for very long, especially when I'm trying to think through the logistics of the way we're presented as the audience, the levitating arms going out. They don't have a lot of speed behind them. It doesn't look like other than just for the sheer flabbergasting the army guys they're going against. Like, I'm not sure why they didn't just like shoot at the main body. It almost felt like we're watching Shyamalan's Earthbending again.
I got nothing to add.
You gotta. I'm guessing you
Nathan,
haven't seen the clip.
That is correct.
You gotta watch it. You gotta watch it. Actually, you know what? Go watch it right now. We'll wait. All right. So then I caught over the last couple of weeks the featurette that was dropped for Star Wars Visions. It looks really cool. It's basically a bunch of anime Star Wars stories. There was I'll have to find it and I'll drop a link in the description if I do, but there was kind of this like anime, like space dogfight kind of thing, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter thing that had come out online a while ago that somebody had made in the style of anime. And ever since I had seen that, I was like, man, I'm really jonesing for a Star Wars anime or Star Wars story like presented in anime form. I love anime. It's a great story, a great artistic medium, and not just that, but storytelling medium. So I'm really, really interested to see what this medium does for Star Wars storytelling. The only thing that came up about this that I have mixed feelings about was that apparently it's not going to be canon. The stories won't be canon, and I have mixed feelings about that. I feel like I kind of want them to be canon, but then at the same time, because they're not, there is now more freedom to tell crazier, more adventurous stories that you wouldn't get because you're trying to keep everything so connected. Did either of you catch this featurette? And how, are you excited for it? And what did you think about it being or not being canon?
This is honestly the first I've heard of it. I did not catch the featurette. Just from your description, yeah, I'd like to see it. I have no qualms with it not being canon. As far as I'm concerned, what is canon in Star Wars right now isn't that great. So yeah, give me something that's not canon. Hopefully it'll be better. That's just my opinion, Having said that, I'm hoping that whatever does become canon for Star Wars future storytelling, that they can draw inspiration from whatever happens in Visions, and then they can include it then. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to get into it, see what it's all about. Because I know the anime intro you're talking about with the X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, I remember exactly what you're talking about. And I'm thinking about it right now with the camera angles they were doing, and then showing all these characters from the old X-Wing DOS flight simulators and TIE Fighter DOS flight simulator games, and just thinking, oh, that was such a great anime. So yeah, I want to see it. And I don't care if it's canon or not, because it's probably going to be a fun ride, because they have no rules, basically,
Yeah.
Of a particular note to Nathan and the TIE Fighter animated fan thing, if you haven't seen it yet, you might want to go and look up. They did a fan project, went and took all of the base game, maybe some of the expansion of the old TIE Fighter computer game, and did a remake of it. Nice, I don't know if they're all quite current visuals, but they ran all the old missions through the X-Wing Alliance engine, and it looks really, really nice.
I did hear about that. I just haven't looked into it specifically yet, but yeah.
Same.
Yeah. But as far as the Visions thing, I kind of glanced through some of the little clip or whatever. I'm probably going to watch it anyway. Anybody who's got Disney Plus and a little time to spare probably will be worth it. It's not anything that's high on the top of my list. It being canon or not, it's probably, again, as one of y'all pointed out, it's better for being able to tell more how they want to tell their stories. So if it's not canon, it gives them more room to breathe, I guess, to do what they want to do. Yeah. I'm just sort of kind of reminded that, like, I know it's not exactly apples to apples here, but the Animatrix was a thing way back when, trying to marry the Matrix and anime stuff. And I guess that went over okay. To me, it wasn't that super great. So hopefully this doesn't turn out to be something like that. Again, it's not a full apples to apples comparison. You've got Warner Brothers v, Lucas and Disney, but I don't know. We'll see how Visions turns out when it, releases.
Yeah. So in the show notes here, I'm very, very interested to hear what Nathan has to say. He apparently wants to talk about Space Jam: A New Legacy.
Yeah. Speaking of Warner Brothers,
And their sister Dot.
Say it again.
And their sister Dot.
Oh, touche.
Hello, nurse.
So we're not going to do a whole episode about this, but I did want to put my 2 cents out there in that, like, I love the original Space Jam movie with Michael Jordan. I think anybody in our age group is going to say the same thing. So when I watched this movie, it was just kind of more like, yeah, let's see how bad they can make it. Let's see how bad they can do. And that way I can just laugh at it. Kind of like when we watched Dragon Ball Evolution in theaters, we went into it knowing it was going to be terrible. We're just going to enjoy the ride. And I got to say, I did enjoy the ride of A New Legacy. I mean, it definitely didn't compare to the original one, but it was still a fun ride. I liked that it wasn't just like they didn't just implant LBJ into Michael Jordan's role. There's a whole nother story going on with him and his character development and everything. Overall, I enjoyed it. If you're hesitant about it, I get it. I understand. But I mean, if you already have access to HBO Max, give it a shot. You don't have to pay $30 like you do on Disney Plus.
Wow. I may have to then give it another chance because one, that is not what I was expecting to hear. I also have very nostalgic, very warm memories of the original Space Jam. I was a big fan of Michael Jordan, and so it was a great movie. And I still, to this day, find myself rewatching it at least once every year, if not every other year, just because it's just brings back a lot of great memories from that time in my life. And so I wasn't holding that against the new movie with LeBron James. I was hopeful that it was going to be great. When they had announced it many, many years ago, I was like, oh, this is really cool. The first one was great. Hopefully the second one will be great. And I got to, without nothing what I mentioned will be spoilers, because I mean it fits basically what you see in the first one, but I got to like,
who cares?
I got to just after he arrives there on the Looney Tunes planet and everybody's gone and it's just him and Bugs. I got to about that part of the movie and then like my brain just clocked out. I was like, yeah, I have no interest in this. I have not enjoyed anything up until that point. I found the character of Algae Rhythm very annoying.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I really don't have any. The movie in the first 15-20 minutes has not given me anything that made me want to watch the rest. And my brain clocked out and I fell asleep. Like, that's how bored I was. Now, Nathan and I, typically the three of us really, but Nathan and I more so usually have similar tastes in things. So, I mean, if he actually ended up enjoying it, I may go ahead and give it another shot and get past that point in the movie and see if it redeems itself for me in the end. But I am pleasantly surprised to hear that you liked it, because it does make me want to give it a second chance.
It helped when I reminded myself at the start of the movie, this movie's not for me. It's for little kids who are growing up with LeBron James as their Michael Jordan. And I just kind of got to go in that frame of reference and don't compare it to anything. Just let it tell the story it's supposed to tell. Having said that, everything you just said, like with Algae Rhythm, I definitely did not care for Algae Rhythm throughout any of it, but I liked Don Cheadle's performance of Algae Rhythm.
Yes.
Okay.
His performance is fantastic, but the character is horrible.
Right. Having said that, knowing how far you got, just be thankful that cartoon LBJ does stop. He's not a cartoon for the rest of the movie.
Okay, good. Because that was annoying me.
It was very annoying. And definitely the movie definitely is an advertisement for Warner Brothers property, all their IP that they own. And if you can get around that, you might find it a bit more enjoyable. But again, I knew I wasn't the target demo for it. And I just was like, all right, let's just watch this, see what it is. And it was a fun ride. I probably won't rewatch it as much as the original Space Jam, but I'm glad I watched it.
Yeah.
Well, on that note of it being an advertisement for all of the Warner Brother properties that they could stuff in there, I have not watched it yet. I will probably watch it before, it leaves HBO, in a month's time. Because again, it's not going to cost me anything extra. But I have, heard some other people discussing it and know some of the spoilers. So Warner Brothers advertisement, that's all well and good. Nathan said, it's not for him, it's not for Nathan, it's not being, it's for kids and everything. Spoilers, Robert. They have the Matrix in this movie.
Yeah.
What, like, they have an Austin Powers reference in this movie. They have a cameo by freaking Rick and Morty. Like, I I know that kids are not necessarily going to pick up on some of this stuff, but like, mommy, daddy, what's that slow motion lady doing? Next.
Yeah.
We've
Whose
already
child
seen
is
in the
this?
trailers. They reference Game of Thrones and everything. It's like, the other thing that is throwing me off about this movie, especially being it, targeted towards kids, I looked at it when I was browsing HBO the other day, because they also have original Space Jam in there. Original Space Jam's runtime is like just under an hour and a half. It's like an hour 27. New Legacies is like an hour 55 minutes. Like,
Whoa.
yeah, that's what keeps throwing me off. It's like, if it's a solid 90 minutes, I can commit to that, no problem. But that extra half hour is sometimes, like, if I get home at work and I'm waiting for my child to wake up and I only have so much time, it may not seem like that much of a difference, but a half hour makes a difference.
It's almost like they could have done two stories with the movie, with the story they wanted to tell, because there's the part where LBJ is a cartoon, they're going around and rounding up the Looney Tunes, and then there's a part that's about Dom and LBJ, his son. And so it's almost like there's two different stories that they try to mush into one, and it does run over a little bit like that. So I can definitely understand that the runtime is longer than what most people are wanting, and I get that. To what James was saying earlier about the different content in it, they also have the goons, I think they're called, from the Clockwork Orange movie, which is
the goons
definitely...
what's the other one I heard? There's like a Mad Max Fury Road scene in there.
Yep,
Like,
Mad Max is in there. They also have the Gremlins, and not the puppets. They do CG. Yeah, the Gremlins are in there, and they're not just like in the background. They're like front of the frame. They hop up in front of the audience, and they're doing their crazy little thing. And they look good because they're not puppets; they're actually CG. So I heard, I forget his name. I think it's Andre, the black nerd YouTuber, where he's like, I bet they're getting ready to do a remake of the Gremlins with using CG, and they want to make sure that that's just kind of like a test thing. So yeah, there is some adult property that is shown in this movie, which is very off-putting.
To be fair, if I go back, I'm pretty sure Gremlins, based on the time it came out, was PG. I think it was in that nebulous time before PG-13 was a thing. I'd have to look up the dates and everything, but
yeah,
Gremlins
that's a little bit more acceptable than a Mad Max or a Matrix or a Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Just like,
it came out in 1984 and it was PG in the category horror fantasy.
Nonetheless, James is right. It does definitely feel like there's some adult properties in a New Legacy that really probably shouldn't have been there, or at the very least should have been more in the background. But yeah, there's definitely a segment where they have like a Game of Thrones world that they fly past, and it's like, really?
There's always some bits in there.
Now, at least something like I understand they've got like they go to a Harry Potter thing, and it's like, okay, that makes a little more sense.
Yeah.
That's sort of that age group range. But the last thing I'm going to say on the whole mixing of properties, I know that's the fun thing to do now, but we already had, it might not have been, fully Warner Brothers centric, but Warner Brothers were the people that did the Ready Player One adaptation. So we've sort of already had a Warner Brothers version of a mixing a ton of properties. Again, Ready Player One was not just Warner Brothers properties, but Warner Brothers are the ones who put it out. So I don't know. This seems like a really weird way to take a Space Jam sequel.
And it is. Let me make that clear. It is a weird way to do it, but again, it was a fun ride.
Well, that concludes our episode on Space Jam. No, I'm just kidding. James, you have anything else for us?
Yeah, welcome to the jam. Nah, we're done with Space Jam. Space Jam's done with us. Just want to briefly talk about, I don't believe either of you have played any of the original Dead Space trilogy.
I have.
Maybe, I don't know. Nathan, you have?
I played the second one for a couple hours. Didn't get that far.
Ah, okay. Well, did you enjoy what you played of it?
I did. I was
Okay,
terrified out
well
of my
then you
mind.
should go back and play it, or go back to the first one even. It's super cheap now because the game came out in 2008. And it'll give you perfect reference for EA finally confirmed this past week, relative to us recording this episode, they are doing a remake of the 2008 video game, and they're redoing that first Dead Space, and they have a teaser for it. And it's, really nice and atmospheric. It's odd in the sense that, like, it was sort of leaked about a month or two ago, so we all knew it was going to happen. EA was having their EA Play Live, their version of an EA E3 press conference. So everybody knew it was going to be officially announced there. So the teaser is only about a minute long. It just shows you some of what could be representative of the, new gen graphics, because this remake will only be on the PS5 in the Xbox Series X and S. It will not be on the PS4 or the Xbox One. So it's going to be nice and pretty and shiny, which will be nice for all the bloods and guts and the gores and dismemberments and stuff. The only thing that's sort of giving me a bit of a pause is they're going the remake route. A lot of people are comparing it to the Resident Evil 2 remake that we had, I think 2 years ago, 2.5, however long, Resident Evil 2 remake. So I can understand the Resident Evil 2 remake because the original game for that came out in the mid to late 90s, as opposed to we're getting a remake of a 2008 video game. That is only, what is that, 13 years ago? So that's
Yeah,
not
13.
that's not that long ago. As opposed to recently, EA, the same company that's doing this Dead Space one, put out a compilation of a remaster of the Mass Effect trilogy.
Mm.
So it basically, they redid some stuff of it, but it's pretty much all the same. I think it's the same engine, or at least they didn't have to go in and redo everything like they're doing with the original Dead Space. The only thing I can see that people have tried to justify it is that Dead Space was a dead series now because the third one was not as well received and everybody just assumed we were not going to get any more. So maybe them doing a full-on remake versus just a remaster polished thing is to try to draw in a new audience, maybe? Now, I'm not
Maybe.
saying that I'm not going to play this game when it comes out, but it's still like I would have preferred just, if not a full-on continuation of the story from where the trilogy left off, maybe a side story, introduce another main character other than the one that we have in the Dead Space trilogy. But I don't know. I played through all three of them. They're very enjoyable. It's sort of like, it's comparable to Alien or Aliens in the fact that you're on this space thing mostly alone. You've got some other survivors that are milling about, either getting in your way or you're trying to help. But it's mostly you versus the alien. I believe they're called necromorphs. And the cool thing about these is they're not just, space zombies. They're space zombies that you can't just kill them with headshots. The whole big part of this game is you have to dismember them before they will finally go down. You take out their head, all right, cool. You've still got a body full of blades coming at you. So you have to get, the famous thing in it is you have to cut off the limbs of all of these enemies, which is convenient because you're playing a space engineer. So he actually has like a plasma torch thing that he can, fire off and cut off all of their limbs. And it's really fun the way that it goes through. And yes, Nathan, terrifying at times. But I would say that if any of you have any interest in it, go back and replay the original. I think even this last week with the announcement of the remaster, like the original's been on sale for like, you can find it for $5 either on PC or, Xbox, PlayStation, and it still is worth a playthrough.
So I'm not into horror type games like this, so I will take a hard pass. However, I do recall Dead Space 1 and 2 being popular among those that enjoy those types of games or that genre. So I mean, I'm excited for you and those that like that series to get another chance to play this in the prettier graphics. But
I will say this. Since I know that you have Xbox Game Pass and it has EA rolled into it, just give yourself a half hour with it, because it's available on there to you at no extra charge.
Just
Do
make
it.
sure the kids are out of the room.
yeah, cool. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the Nintendo Switch. Now, I believe, Nathan, you have a Switch,
Yes.
right? James does not. I don't recall James having a Switch, or did he get one?
No, I got a Switch. It's right there.
Haha. A Nintendo Switch. And
For the
on that
audio
Switch.
audience, I turned off a light and then turned it back on. Ergo, I have a light Switch. It's a light Switch, not a Nintendo Switch Lite, but a light Switch.
Anyway, so Nintendo a couple weeks ago, again, time being relative to this episode, they are releasing a Nintendo Switch OLED edition for a while now, like what, 2 years at least. I think the rumors have been floating around about a Switch Pro coming out. And instead of a Switch, the last time a Switch was released, we basically got the same Nintendo Switch, but with a better battery and newer chips and stuff. I mean, the same chips, just newer, right? New parts and stuff, but the same specs and everything. So then now this time around, people are clamoring again. The news is cycling for a Switch Pro, and instead we get the Switch OLED edition.
Hey, come on, you got to make it sound more manly. You got to go with what everybody's calling it, the Swold, the SWOLED, Swold.
So anyway, in this new Switch, it's a new 7-inch OLED screen. It's a better looking screen, a little larger, but it's still 720p. You can get 1080p if you dock it and hook it up to a television, just like you can do with the Switch now. It's got a newer kickstand. That's pretty neat, because I don't know if you've all seen the kickstand on a Switch before, but it's just this rinky dinky little thing that just snaps off if you press too hard. It's basically a trash kickstand. So it's got kind of a full body kickstand similar to like a Microsoft Surface, which is really nice. So that was neat. It's 64 gigs of built-in memory instead of 32. I'm sure parents that don't want to spend a ton of money on a Switch will like that kind of upgrade. And then better speakers. And then the dock comes in white now, and it has white controllers, and the dock has a built-in Ethernet port for those that like to play Nintendo Switch online. I don't know who plays Nintendo Switch online, because there are not a lot of games you can play online, and the online service is pretty trashy, but whatever. I'm happy with my current Switch. It works. It plays all the games that I want to play. I am not going to dump another $350.
It works, does it? It works, does it? Turn it on.
Well, the battery's dead right now because it's been
it doesn't work.
It works if I charge it. The point is that it is a good working Switch. And I don't feel like dumping any money into just this kind of upgrade. This little bit of news is a little disappointing because the Switch plays great. I'm not complaining that it needed an upgrade to a Pro version. I don't think anybody really needs Pro version. I think Nintendo's target is really just to make good games. They don't have to necessarily look like the next gen graphics. But at this point, with Microsoft and Sony having released their next gen consoles, Nintendo's kind of way behind in this space. I feel like at this point, they're behaving a lot like Apple does. Like Apple just now is finally putting 1080p cameras in some of their computers, but not all of them. They don't have 4K webcams. Like at this point, there shouldn't be any reason why everything isn't 4K, for crying out loud. My cell phone is 4K. the graphics in my cell phone perform just as well as a Nintendo Switch. So like, come on, Nintendo, is it really going to cost you that much more money to upgrade the graphics in it just a little more, make it 4K, 1080p on the console, 4K when you plug it into a TV, and then actually drive up sales? I think that would help. Do either of you care?
I mean, honestly, I have not gotten a Switch up to this point. This is not influencing me to get it anymore. The only thing that would have made me want to get a Switch up to this point is, all the Nintendo, developed titles that are obviously going to be locked to it. Would I love to pick up a Switch and play the new Metroid that they just announced? Sure. I'd probably also play some of the Marios, maybe the Zeldas, etc. and so on. But my issue comes down to hours in the day and not having enough time as is to watch or play whatever it is I'm trying to watch and play. So adding another thing that, half the time will lay around as a brick that might lose its charge doesn't really make that much sense to me. I just found it amusing that, like, what was it, a couple days later, maybe a week later, after the OLED announcement, which, tangent, every time I keep hearing it, I keep thinking somebody's going to call it the Ole instead. But a couple days, week later, we have Valve come out with their announcement for the Steam Deck, which is essentially a what would be, everybody wanted the Nintendo Pro Switch to be.
Mhm.
The Steam Deck is basically a laptop, gaming PC in the size of a Switch. So it can be done. Granted, the Steam Deck is pricier by quite a bit than a Switch. I want to say the cheap end model is still like $450, maybe $500. So that's quite a jump up from the $350 of the OLED model for the new Switch. But still, the timing of it was just like chef's kiss to Valve. Like, ooh, they don't have a Pro announcement. Quick, get our Steam Deck out there. I'm sure it probably was not intentional. It was just the timing of it was fun. So long and short of it, no, I'm not going to get either of them.
Yeah, I think at this point, if you don't have a Switch, then the Switch OLED is not really going to make you want to get one. I will say, for those who have been wanting a Switch for a while and just haven't been able to get their hands on one, maybe it's good that they waited, because now they get a better screen. I'm just sorry that that's all they get. I will say also that I've wanted a dock with an Ethernet port on it pretty much ever since I got the Switch. Just because I like to have wired connections for my consoles, and
hey, thankfully, Nathan, they will be selling that dock separately.
Actually,
so
the dock has to be sold separately. You cannot buy a Switch OLED with a dock. You buy a Switch OLED and then you buy a dock.
Well, that's really weird and dumb.
Yes, it is.
Are you really sure? Because you're paying $350.
That's what I've heard. I have not verified it, so please take that with a grain of salt. But what's really funny about all that is I've heard that the docks with the Ethernet ports are the things that are selling up the most right now, and that you can't find them.
I know that Nintendo docks are notoriously difficult to get. After, like, outside of buying the entire console, they are ridiculously difficult to get. I have not heard that the dock would not be included. That would be really weird for them to charge $50 more than the standard Switch, but then not include a dock. So
I agree. I'm just saying that's what I've heard.
Yeah. I would imagine it had to be included, but they are selling the dock separately, which is neat for those that want an Ethernet jack. You can also get a USB to Ethernet adapter and plug it into the dock. Those work too. So I would say don't go spend what they're probably going to charge, is going to probably be somewhere around $70 for the dock. I would just well, you don't shop Amazon, but just go online and find a cheap $20 USB to Ethernet adapter, and that will work just as well.
But I'd still like to have a dock for every TV. Ideally, in an ideal world where I'm playing the Switch more than I do now, I would want a dock on each of my TV.
Yeah. So wrapping up,
using some quick Google foo, Nathan. You pay that extra $50 for the OLED, you are getting the new dock.
Cool. I'm glad I was wrong, because that was a really horrible thing if that were true.
Yeah.
How dare you try to slander our Lord and Savior Nintendo?
Wrapping up the Switch talk so that we can kind of also wrap up this episode with some recommendations. If you do, like Nathan said, if you do not have a Switch and you have been waiting for the moment to buy one, if you've been waiting for a Switch Pro, I would tell you, I don't think it's ever coming. At this point, we've been waiting for it for 2 years. They've had 2 opportunities to release it and they have not. I don't think the Switch Pro is coming. I don't think that's what they're aiming for. So if you have been wanting a Switch, the OLED, I would recommend springing the extra $50 for the OLED model. You do get a slightly larger screen. Basically, there's like a black bezel around the Switch here in the regular base model. That bezel is essentially almost entirely gone in the new one. So you're getting a little bit of bigger screen. Better OLEDs are brighter and sharper, so they look nicer. The kickstand, like I said, piece of junk. The new one will be much better. So, you know, yeah, the $50 for the screen and the kickstand alone. I mean, the $50 is worth just the kickstand. Trust me. If you want to set it down on the table, snap off the Joy-Con and just have it sit on the table while you play with 2 friends playing Mario Party or, you know, whatever, that's worth the $50.
Nathan, what are these friends you speak of?
Mm.
You're
These
right.
IRL friends that you would pop up a Joy-Con for.
You're right. I don't have friends.
And hey, you're more than welcome to pay this extra $50 for the OLED, and it'll come with free Nintendo guaranteed Joy-Con drift issues.
Oh yeah.
Operators are standing by.
I will say that I have not experienced Joy-Con drift myself. So I guess I'm one of the fortunate ones. So we'll cap off our show by going into our recommendations. These are things, movies, comics, TV shows, books, music, what have you, that we have been discovering, experiencing, enjoying over the last couple of weeks. And we want to recommend it to you, our viewers, to check out. These could also potentially be things we didn't get a chance to discuss here. So for example, I'll start by saying that I got to watch Black Widow. I thought it was a great movie. If you want to spring the $30 to see it early on Disney Plus and you've got a family of 4 to watch it with, I'd recommend it. I don't necessarily think that it's necessary to spend the $30. Like you can wait an extra 30 days to watch it for free if you've got Disney Plus. But it was a very good movie.
On that note, did you do the Disney Plus or did you do a theater? And it's not 30 days, it's 90 days. But go.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought it was 30. No, I did Disney Plus. So, and I enjoyed it. It was a very good movie. If you don't want to spend the $30 to see it at home, you can spend the $30 and go see it in a theater. If you're ready to go and do that, I recommend it. It was a very good movie. I also got to see Infinite. This is a movie on Paramount Plus with Mark Wahlberg. I also enjoyed it. It did not receive great reviews. I think it's got a 17% rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. But I actually enjoyed it. It's a very good movie. And I would recommend checking it out. It was pretty cool.
Well, lately I have been replaying my way through the original Psychonauts video game on the Xbox. I had played it way back when on the original Xbox, but it has been a number of years since I played it, and the sequel is coming out on August 25th of this year. So I figured this is as good a time as any to go back and go, oh wait, I totally forgot that was a thing in this video game, which I've done quite a number of times. If you enjoy, old style 3D platformers and collectathons, you'll enjoy this game. It's also got the humor of Tim Schafer, who has a pedigree from a bunch of old, LucasArts point and click adventure type games. And he's done a bunch of other things, done Psychonauts, Brutal Legend, a couple other things that I haven't really played, but he has a nice humorous style, the art style, and just everything within all these psychic brain worlds are all unique. You've got one where it's, kind of like Matador themed. You've got another where the person's brain is like a military simulation. Just another one is a like a disco ball thing, and it gives you a whole bunch of different things that you can do, and it's really enjoyable. So anybody who has any kind of interest in the sequel that is coming out in August, it wouldn't hurt to go back and give the first one a shot, especially if you have Xbox Game Pass. It is included there for no additional charge. Otherwise, it's probably pretty cheap. It can be played backwards compatible on the Xbox One. Plus, the PC version is supposed to be pretty good. Go ahead, give it a go.
I got to watch some it's called Gordon Ramsay Uncharted, I think is what the name of the show is. My mom was on had cataract surgery a week or so ago, and so I was staying with her to help her out during recovery for that. So I was watching her TV shows, which thank God were no soap operas. But she was watching this show Uncharted with Gordon Ramsay, and it was a really interesting adventure with the episode I watched where he goes to I think the town was called Oaxaca in Mexico. Really weird, like Oaxaca. I don't remember exactly, but he's going through and he's learning how to make mole, like official or authentic mole, and they're having to go out to find these really weird ingredients to include like grub and honey ants and some wasps as well. And then and apparently food is very big to them down there, that the Oaxacan food is very ingrained with their culture, to the point that when he's making the mole, at one point he has to strip naked to go into like this sweat lodge or whatever to cleanse himself before he finishes making the mole. And I was just like, wow, this is like no joke. Thank God it wasn't me going around doing this. So it was really entertaining, and I usually enjoy Gordon Ramsay fairly well. So it's kind of nice getting to see more cultural things like that. Especially had no idea there were so many different flavors available in Mexico like that, because I haven't gone outside of this country, so I don't know what all is out there. But you always hear about European cuisine, not really so much Mexican cuisine beyond Taco Bell or whatever. And just learning that when you think of mole, it's the black mole that's like chocolate flavored. Apparently, I'm not for sure about that, but there's also different colored moles you can get that are green, yellow, and orange, and it's just kind of like, I know nothing about food. I am ashamed. I did not catch what it was on. I think it's on History Channel. I could be wrong. I really don't remember. I just was kind of in awe the entire time. But yeah, Gordon Ramsay, Uncharted. He goes around the world, learns how to make different types of cuisines. The one I saw was for Oaxaca in Mexico, and it was just a really great ride.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining us this week. We'd like to know what you thought about some of the topics we discussed. What did you think about Loki? What did you think about some of the news bits that we shared about remakes of video games, this OLED Switch? Are you excited for Star Wars Visions? Let us know what you thought about the different topics we shared today. Leave us a comment on this video if you're watching on YouTube, or you could also leave us a comment or check us out on Facebook. You can go to Facebook and just search for This Is Going to Be Terrible. You can also go to facebook.com/This Is Going to Be Terrible and reach our page there as well. Let us know what you thought, and maybe we'll share your comments or your thoughts on our next episode. Make sure to subscribe, hit a bell, leave us a review, shout us about us from the rooftops, whatever you'd like. We appreciate the feedback, and we appreciate you, our audience, for sticking around and listening to us to talk about things that we found interesting. Like I said, maybe we can give you a shout out in our next episode. Till next time, later.
And next time will totally be in another 2 to 3 months. Haha. Goodbye.
Ooh, another break. Be good to each other out there.